Hey guys, we're firing up. I'm Tom LoBianco, editor, co-founder, 24 Site News. With me today is the Ryan Lizza. Ryan Lizza just started Tell Us News on Substack. Ryan, thanks for being here, brother.
Hey, it's my pleasure. You were, we didn't talk about this before I launched, but when I was talking to other people, a lot of people pointed me to what you were doing at 24 Site News, and so it was without you knowing this, Tom, it was an inspiration, and so I congratulations on the success you're having. And I'll say this later when more people get on, but anyone who's subscribing to Tell Us News, you should also subscribe to 24 Site News.
Thank you,
If
sir.
if it's one or the other, you only have a certain amount of money to spend. You probably want to stick with Tellus. Tom can suck it up, but no, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Subscribe to both, please.
Back at you, baby.
And
I love seeing you on here, out here in the wild, wild west.
yeah, and for people that don't know, I mean, all your readers know this, but Tom is the foremost expert on Mike Pence, and so we'll get into a little Pence news. I hope this, during the session.
I'm very much looking forward to it. We chatted a little bit offline before this, and I really feel like, it to the extent there's anything exciting right now, in this moment in American history, is
Yeah,
seeing people fight back. It's seeing,
yeah, that's it.
defenders of
Yeah.
the Constitution step up.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it reminds me, I haven't put this out yet, but at 3:15, I'm going to do a
Mm,
Substack live with Simon Rosenberg.
nice.
And he has a phrase. We're going to talk about this as well. There, he has this phrase. Simon's a longtime Democratic strategist. He's always been uh, quick to embrace new media. And I
Mm,
remember 20 years ago when blogs were coming along, Simon was very into that. And he's got has a huge presence here on Substack now. And he's got this phrase, circle of defiance, that
oh,
the
nice.
circle of defiance is spreading. And I thought that's a good political strategist way of looking at this. And he tries to organize Democrats to rally against what's going on, and that's I think that's a useful way of looking at it. Is that what we were talking about offline? Is that it's contagious, and the way he describes it is, the circle expands, and so I feel like um, when I jumped into Telus News on April 21st. Um, I wish I had done it a few months before, but I was, watching everything from the sidelines was very interesting, and things were very, very different in late April compared to late January.
Yes.
And just in sort of thinking about like what I was going to cover, and what I want to tell us news to be about. Um, the mission didn't change, but the number of institutions and people by the time you get into late April that had uh, changed their mind about the approach that you need to take was significantly increased. And I think that's sort of been the story of April and May, is people saying, well, wait a second, maybe it's not a good idea to just buckle under pressure, um,
Yeah.
and to push back. Anyway, that's my kind
Which,
of
amen, baby.
long-winded, opening on that. What when you talk about that, what are you thinking of? What are the examples, and what are the sort of shifts that you're thinking about?
I was thinking of the Gary Kasparov. I mean, who, we know the older folks know as the grandmaster at chess. Good to have a grandmaster at chess on the side of democracy these days. Has noted that you could go with despair. All right, you could go the route of like, oh my God, this is going to turn into Hungary or Turkey, of late. Uh, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
but American culture is steeped in defiance. That's our story.
Mm.
It's really remarkable, and I still get chills thinking about it. I went. I was talking with my kiddos class for career day, and
How old is your kid?
she's 8.
8. Okay.
She's, this is that time where they start to get a little introspective, and they're interested in morals. And I feel like so much of America is interested in morals right now, and ethics and the core, you
Mm,
know. Um, and they're asking questions, good, deep, thoughtful questions about what's going on right now. And you know what's going on? The rule of law applies.
mm.
That was not a rebellious or revolutionary statement a year ago. It sounds that way now,
Yeah.
but it's famous. I mean, it's our story. It's our American story, and I think back to what Gary Kasparov has said about this. It's rooted in our culture. This is the American story.
Yeah, and I think I can't disagree anymore. I can't disagree with that at all. And one thing about kids that age is they have such a strong sense of morals. And as you probably know, I have two kids, two boys, and at that age, at 8, and uh, that doesn't really change. They are very, very quick to point out hypocrisy.
Yes.
Because they're constantly being controlled and told what to do, and so they're always looking for authority figures who aren't living up to those same principles that they're supposed to live up to. So I think I agree with you in the way that kids sometimes can sort of point these really obvious truths out, where sometimes commentators and people who cover politics try to complicate everything. Um, that's why a lot of the conversations this week I've had with people about the media's coverage of this is the media overcomplicates things.
Yeah.
There, it's obvious what's going on. It's obvious um, that his Trump's defiance of the rule of law on a number of significant issues um, is to me very very obvious. I had a
Yeah.
conversation with Michael Ludig this week, and he's got
Oh,
this piece
wow.
he's got this piece coming out. I don't know if it's out yet, but he previewed it for us, where he went through 16 what he calls major initiatives of the
Mm,
Trump administration, and he's a former federal judge, spent 15 years on the bench, and he goes through them, as a judge would, to explain why he believes that not a single one of these 15, actually I said 15, I think it's 16 if you count them closely, none of these 16 major initiatives, from tariffs to the major deportation policies
mm,
to the executive orders targeting Krebs and Miles Taylor, the executive orders targeting the law firms, the attempts to bully and coerce academic institutions, all the big ones that we talk about.
yeah.
Every one of these, there's a court challenge to. And he goes through all 16 to say every single one of them, or he puts it in the reverse, not a single one of them has authority under the Constitution or the laws of the
Mm,
United States. That's quite a statement. And we get so overwhelmed with this stuff, it's
yes.
hard to keep track of it. But that to me is the core of what we witnessed since late January, and that I don't totally see it being um, reflected in the media coverage. I
Yes.
still think and feel free to disagree with me on this, but one of my frustrations with political journalism as it's practiced is it's still uh, people are so inside the system that they're covering these things with their nose pressed up against the glass, and the sort of big picture that we're watching a president defy the Constitution on a regular
Yes.
basis kind of gets lost. It's not to say that that's not a big part of the coverage, but it gets lost in the sort of back and forth and the tweets and the this and the that, and trying to keep track of it all. And anyway, I think it's really useful for someone like Ludig to come along and sort of study the whole sweep of the last 4 months and sort of say, this is none of this is constitutional. At the end of my interview with him, Tom, he had a really dark statement. I mean, he basically I was asking him, what do you think the prospects of things getting better are?
Mm,
And he said he didn't see them. And he said, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but essentially that we no longer have in America, we no longer have a country governed by laws, but
mm.
instead by men. The reverse of what that famous quote. And I
Wow.
thought that was pretty unsettling coming from someone like Ludig, who, as you know, grew up in sort of Federalist Society,
Yeah.
conservative legal circles, and is not one to be super hyperbolic. Um,
Yeah.
so I
And he is. I mean, I remember during the January 6th hearings a few years ago, um, it was so powerful to us who, do this, who know his import in this world, to see him testify.
Yep.
And his testimony was as powerful as it was in the substance, was also measured. It was not hyperbolic.
Yeah.
And, in some ways, this might be considered one of the failures, from the before times of the, folks will call a failure of imagination of what we're witnessing right now. Um, I'm going to be Pollyannish. Okay. I'm just going to do it, babe. I'm hopeful because, what Liz Cheney said at the end of those hearings, and to what you said, is that, it's not institutions, it's not paper, it's not the Constitution that does this. It's individuals making decisions in the moment. And there have been tremendous acts of bravery in this. It's easier to go along.
What would you put on that list of the acts of bravery?
Well, I think everybody who stayed in the Capitol on January 6th,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
I see.
know,
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. You're talking about right. Right. Got it. Got it. You're talking about the
yeah,
January 6th. Got it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and continues today.
Yeah. I thought you were talking about during the Trump administration. Sorry. But yeah, of course there were acts of
I'm not,
bravery
I'm
that day.
not
Yeah.
sure about,
Yeah.
inside the administration.
Yeah.
Horrendous acts of sycophancy, perhaps. Um,
All right. Well,
people, yeah.
that's a good transition to talk about. Speaking of sycophancy, Ed Martin.
Mm,
I've been obsessed with this Ed Martin character um, since his name came on the radar as acting U.S. attorney. Just because like you, I live in Washington D.C. and given his background, I mean,
mm,
before you get to his full bio, I mean, he has no prosecutorial experience whatsoever. Um, he was there outside the Capitol on January 6th. He went on to become one of these people who represented legally January 6th defendants, and also just for years has tried to whitewash what happened that day. When he was appointed U.S. attorney, he was still defending a
mm,
January 6th uh, defendant who was being prosecuted by the U.S. attorney. He became the U.S. attorney and then uh, dismissed the case, which I've never heard of anything like that. Um, and then, of course, Trump nominated him to be the permanent U.S. attorney. He's got all sorts of associations with fringe right wing figures. Um, and once Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth, um, and RFK
mm,
Jr. And once these guys all became confirmed. I just figured there was no one that Pam Bondi, someone in the chat just noted Bondi's brother
Yes.
is now in the news. I just figured there was basically Trump could get anyone confirmed. I thought there was just no one that Republicans in the Senate would have a problem with. But this week, uh, Tom Tillis seems to have, well, no, Tom Tillis did kill Ed Martin's
Yes.
nomination.
Remarkable.
Um, and Tillis was one of, oh, excuse me, Tillis was one of these people who, who was under enormous pressure to support the most controversial nominees this year. Um, got threats and all sorts of awful things to secure his vote. And Trump gave up on Martin, and now of course he's nominated Janine Pirro. And but what do you think that is? What do you think explains Tillis getting a little spine on this? Is it Trump's declining popularity? Is it
Think that
guilt? um,
I think when you realize these politicians, whether you're a senator, member of the House, state lawmaker, you name it, are always looking forward to how they're going to keep their career, right? And and when you understand that you're going to get nailed from the right, quote unquote, and I'm not even sure you could call it the right anymore, not in any sort of ideological sense, but from some other side of just even more loyal to Trump, right? So, in that sense, um, it's going to happen anyway, you know, and I think there's a compounding factor here is we're starting to see. I mean, we both covered the Republican Tea Party, back in the day. We're starting to see that same
It does seem
language.
like it seems like an actual traditional Tea Party compared to what's going on now. Like it literally
Yes.
seems like people sitting around just drinking tea compared to what's happening now. But anyway,
I
I
mean, it's
digress. I
quaint, right?
digress.
You remember when folks like God, what's Tea Party Express and all them were very careful to say, well, these folks putting the Hitler mustache on Obama, they're not us. Those are probably a bunch of LaRouches, okay? So, and when they infiltrated us, all right.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
that's not extreme enough. Now you have to put together a militia and attack the Capitol and beat the hell out of some cops. All right, that's how you win your badges, in
No,
that world.
they have the Republican activists and most Republican politicians, not all of them, but Trump certainly, they have adopted the view that you do not condemn or criticize anyone to your right or on the right, no matter how bad. And Trump certainly he's been practicing that since 2015. You absolutely you don't you know you don't condemn Nazis, you don't condemn racists. That's all just a game that the media is trying to play, and that in their view. And so there's basically no one right wing, racist,
Mm.
or controversial where you go after them. And that's a huge difference in the in
Yeah,
the in the Republican Party. There's plenty of people in Congress, plenty of Republicans in Congress who don't view things that way. But that is the fundamental one of the fundamental changes that Trump has instituted in the Republican Party.
yeah. The accelerant on it, if things were headed that way. Um, but I see this, to Tillis, why would he stand up? All right. If you know you're going to get this primary challenge anyway, all right, and nothing you do by fact of being there, all right, will be enough. Well, in some ways, that's liberating.
Yeah,
If once you come to that, because a lot of these
yeah,
guys, where they came up, Tillis was the old North Carolina Speaker of the House, right? They came up in a different world of politics where you could work in the back rooms, all right? You could have meetings with the sitting president of the United States and be like, all right, look, we're going to say this in public, all right, but we're going to work on this one, all right? and
Yeah.
that but that's not the case anymore. And I do kind of wonder too, from a strategic sense, how much Trump has already blown through all of his cards in this by not holding
Yeah.
back anything.
Tom, I'm just gonna plug in my phone here so we don't
Yeah, no,
lose
it does. It
battery.
drains the
It
yeah,
drains it
right.
fast. That's something I always forget to do. So there we go.
Um,
Wait, Tom,
yeah,
can I just pause on this? Because I haven't been
yeah.
following the local North Carolina political angle with Tillis. Is there any news on a primary challenger to him, or what
I
his
haven't
political
seen the
future might be?
primary challenger
Okay.
yet.
But you're just
Yeah,
saying in general, once
yeah,
you just decide like you're probably headed that way.
yeah.
Yeah.
You,
Well, and I
and if
suppose once you
yeah,
make that decision, then it does change things. I think you're absolutely right politically, just thinking this through. Once you know you're gonna have a primary challenge and, these decisions can then can be a positive for you if you think that, like, the electorate, it's gonna be kinda this kinda, like, center versus right, thing, and, then you're maybe looking to do things, that distinguish you from your right-wing opponent, but, um
Trump's still like there is a when he's high on his own supply, all right, like
Trump.
right after the election, all
Yeah.
right, they think they can do anything, right? Even wait while Susie Wiles is off in some other part of the airplane, and then listen to Boris Epstein. There's a shining beacon of political advice. All right, and nominate Matt Gaetz, the Attorney General. Well, that
I
didn't
almost
last
forgot
long,
about Gates. I almost forgot about
right?
Gates in thinking about all these. Yeah. I mean,
So at the height of it, right at the height of this, they'll do extreme things. But it wasn't that long ago where Trump was right after January 6th and that year and a half afterward, where he still was something of a pariah, relatively speaking, inside the party. And when you had DeSantis ascendant,
yep.
which might seem like a century ago at this point, but there was that moment. Would cut deals. Trump would cut deals politically to maintain majorities in the chambers, achieve majorities in the House and the Senate, and you can see something like that happening. Where I mean, look at this polling out of Michigan. All right. This, where the independents are running from Trump right now, as he does his 100-day tour. All right.
Yeah.
So like the real world impact of this stuff, and people aren't buying the messaging. It's kind of uh, getting stuck in that ecosphere of Twitter, the extreme online crowd, where it's like, oh, we just say trans something, right? A couple fire jets fall off a aircraft carrier, and we're just going to say, well, we killed trans. All right, that's gone. All right, and that'll fix it. All right. Well, that only works for that crowd. It doesn't work
Yeah.
for people losing their jobs. People are worried about buying cars now. People and parents. I mean, God, I think about this. Do I need to do my Christmas shopping now? All right. What the
How
hell?
many dolls does your 8-year-old want?
I
That's the question.
right?
Is she a 20 doll kid, or is she going to be okay with two?
I don't know. I used to think we have too many. Now I don't know. So get back to what we were saying at the top. The winds are shifting. All right, and it creates some weakness for Trump. Mark Carney, the Canadian, walked into the White House and told the president to stuff it. When the hell did that ever happen?
Yeah. I mean, you really got to be messing up to get the Canadians this agitated. I mean, you really just have to be like really obnoxious and impolite, and yeah. I mean, the Canadians are good at being passive aggressive, but to see the Canadians aggressive in
You
this
got to do
way,
something real mean for that. That and so,
yeah,
Ryan, for everyone who's watching it, I'm sure you've probably already read this, guys. But Ryan, one of the things I love about having you here on Substack out in the Wild West with all of us here is you brought your style of in-depth reporting with you, and you had this incredible piece about Devin Nunes and Stephen Biss. And I'm
Thank
not
you.
gonna
Yeah.
oh, dude, I loved it, man. It's like it reminded me, like, I'd read your pieces that, we talked about this before. You had a great one years ago about how that came so close, so close with a guy named Lindsey Graham, of all people, to a climate deal. All right. And it's just
Yeah.
like when I pick up a Lizza piece, I'm like, man, I got, I just put everything on mute, man. Just chill with it. All right. And
No, I
and
really
this was
appreciate
like
that.
a classic, man. It was a Lizza classic. Uh,
Weird to write. I mean, one thing that's was both liberating and a little weird was to write that piece, Tom, just kind of, on my own.
mm,
It's such an interesting experience, being unchained and unshackled from a big corporate uh, newsroom or institution. Um, that piece was easier to write in some ways because so much of it is stuff I witnessed up close.
yeah.
For viewers that don't know, the piece is called Devin Nunes, Stephen Biss, and the Laptop of MAGA Secrets.
Mm.
Um, the uh, the subhead is Attorney Stephen Biss represented famous MAGA clients in a lawfare campaign against the press. Things didn't go exactly as planned. And so, yeah, the story is that Devin Nunes, who's now this
Mm.
very, very high paid CEO of the company that owns Truth Social. So
Right.
he was a longtime member of Congress, ran the Intelligence Committee at his peak in Congress,
Yeah.
was when I met him in 2015, just as Trump was starting to run for president, Nunes was an establishment House Republican, conservative, but was defined by defending the Republican leadership against the barbarian hordes who were starting the sort of campaign of government shutdowns
Mm.
and um, uh, making lives very, very difficult for Republican leadership that we have seen, up until today. And so Nunes was sort of one of the people pushing back against that. He famously called the Tea Party folks, Republicans in the House, lemmings with suicide vests, because
Yes. I
he
remember
thought that
that.
their plan to blow up to shut down the government was so crazy. Um, and once Trump came along, everything changed, so he
Yeah.
followed, he followed the trajectory of a lot of Republicans from 2015 on, going from like a John Boehner, leadership type to to a full on Trump supporter.
Yeah.
And of course then Trump lured him out of Congress and put him in charge of his technology company. In the middle of that, in 2018-19, he teamed up with a very unusual Virginia lawyer named Stephen Biss.
Mm.
And Nunes and Biss started suing everyone. The Washington Post, NBC, me. Where I was at the time at Esquire magazine. I wrote a piece that involved Nunes. Um, and then Biss himself represented people
Mm.
beyond Nunes. He represented the family of Michael Flynn. He represented
Oh, yes.
Kash Patel, now the FBI director. Dan Bongino, now the deputy FBI director. He represented Trump Media and Technology Group. So he's
Yeah.
essentially, through that corporation, the president's lawyer as well. And these cases never went anywhere. They all
Mm.
got thrown out either early or, on motions to dismiss or motions for summary judgment. None of them made it to a jury. There's only one that I know that is still active, and it's awaiting the judges deciding on a motion for summary judgment. That's the one against um, NDC. Um, and I spent 6 years in litigation with Devin Nunes, and his lawyer, Stephen Biss, and it it sort of made me aware early on of what the kind of weaponizing
Mm.
the government against the press,
Yeah.
the people, what that's like. They
Yeah.
used the court system, the discovery process, um, not to, in my view, not because they thought they were defamed, it was a defamation case, but to harass, to get people to
Yeah.
back down, to make it more difficult for the Washington Post and NBC and me and others to cover them, because now you've got like this conflict of interest. Well, the Washington Post can't cover Devin Nunes; they're in litigation. That was behind it, and it. So in writing it recently, I understood it in a new way now that I've
Mm.
watched this kind of like, frankly, very haphazard, not very sophisticated plan that started in 2018, 2019 against the press become sort of turbocharged with Trump in the White House, where they see all government resources, not just the courts,
Yeah.
but the entire Justice Department, the all the strings attached to federal funding, executive orders, where they see the entire government as a political tool that can be
Yeah.
leveraged against Trump's perceived enemies. And so it just sort of like made me realize, huh, that was something I was in the middle of something much bigger in a
Yeah.
lot of ways than just this little lawsuit. And the case did not officially end until the morning, excuse me, until the night before I published that piece. I published that piece on a Tuesday morning. That their last deadline to appeal to the Supreme Court expired at midnight the night before. So that's why I waited to write all of this. I didn't want them to suddenly get mad and think, all right, maybe, maybe we can get the Supreme Court to overturn this. But so a lot of the piece is about that experience. But then there's this whole crazy chapter of the piece, Tom, where I learned some wild, wild things about the lawyer, Stephen Biss,
Mm.
and things that are still being sorted out in a courtroom in Charlottesville, Virginia, right now. I won't ruin all the ending, but suffice to say, this lawyer who teamed up with all of these Trump MAGA activists and harassed the press for 6 years. Let's just say he was not exactly on the up and up. So, and it raises a great question. It's like, you know, Devin Nunes, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Trump's company.
Yeah.
These people were using a lawyer who turned out to be, let's just say, not the most ethical person in the world. I don't want to ruin the full ending. Um, and you know, did they know? Did they know like he was, what he was doing? And I'm sorry to be vague,
Do they
but I
care?
want people to. Do they care? And do they care? Do they care now? I mean, now they, surely they know now. There's one other side story to this, Tom, that didn't get much attention because people have a lot going on. But one of them, the piece I wrote originally in Esquire was about a dairy farm in Iowa that is owned and operated by Devin Nunes's family, his parents, his
Yeah.
brother, and his sister-in-law. And in 2018, I wrote this piece for Esquire, um, where I went to Northwest Iowa, which at the time was represented by Steve King,
Oh,
very
wow.
a-
Yeah. Of
a-
course.
most anti-immigrant Republican. The district voted for Trump by something like 80%
Mm.
in 2016. Um, and one thing you learn very quickly when you go there is that the entire agricultural economy is dependent on undocumented workers. No surprise, right? Including the dairy industry.
Mm.
And you can't run a dairy in the Midwest of the United States without relying on undocumented labor. It, you talk to anyone in the industry, and that's just the way it is. And so I thought this was kind of interesting that Devin Nunes, whose entire political identity is about um, being a farmer and a dairy farmer and his family's, dairying life. I thought it was fascinating that his family dairy um, probably uh, is not the only. It's probably not the only dairy in the region
Mm.
that somehow escapes the economic uh, rules that make them depend on undocumented immigrant labor. And so I talked to some people. I was able to confirm the use of undocumented labor at that dairy. Um, we had several sources that are quoted in the piece to that effect. Um, and Nunez and his family didn't like this piece. They didn't like me pointing out the sort of complications of this Trumpy district where
Yeah.
Trump's best friend, his family runs a dairy and it uses undocumented labor. And yet the president's policy at the time, then and now, was to rid the entire country of every undocumented immigrant. And that was the piece. Frankly, I tried to be very sympathetic to the plight of the dairy farmers. It's through
Yeah.
no fault of their own that they have to rely on that kind of labor. But it was quite fascinating that 80, places that vote for Trump at 80% are also the places that rely, in some cases, more on undocumented labor,
Mm.
than anywhere. Anyway, that piece got me sued. Devin Nunes didn't like it. His family that owned the dairy didn't like it. And he sued me for something like $78 million.
Oh, that's it?
And the family added another 25 or $30 million. And so it was over $100 million. The cases got combined, long ups and downs through the legal history, but it took 6 years before it all ended.
Mm.
And, one of the things you learn as a journalist going through that is um, it's really, really important to have an institution that has your back.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Esquire, which is owned by Hearst, they had my back 100%. I didn't even work there anymore when the lawsuit came, and they defended that lawsuit. They probably spent, it was in-house counsel that did it, but they probably spent the equivalent of 10 or $20 million defending that lawsuit in terms of
Wow.
if there were actual billable hours. Um, but the crazy thing at the end of all this is that through the discovery process, we got everything from this dairy, and
Oh,
we
interesting.
we determined we hired an expert witness that went through all of their records. So Devin Nunes's family's dairy had to turn over everything to us, and I just kept thinking, why in the world are they doing this? This is so dumb. They're not going to win this case. We're going to show that the dairy is using undocumented labor, and they're going to be humiliated. And I just could never wrap my head around, like, why
Mm.
is Nunes it seemed very clear to me that the family was doing this because Devin thought it was a good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
they hired Devin's lawyer during depositions. They told us that they weren't paying for the legal representation, and it just seemed so clear that this was being run by
Yeah.
Trump's best friend, Devin Nunes, and this lawyer, Stephen Biss, who was suing everyone, every journalist who wrote about Nunes. So we get there's this great moment. I'm sorry to go on by this. I
I
hope
love
your
this. This is
viewers are
so good.
interested in this. But there's this moment where we start to take the depositions of the employees at the farm. And the first deposition is with a guy who had followed me and had contacted my sources after I interviewed them when I did the reporting in Iowa. And I
Mm.
wrote about that in the piece. Um, he sits down and I wasn't there for this, but it's all in the record. And this incredible lawyer from Hearst starts putting these documents in front of him. To make a long story short, he shows the guy um, the I-9, believe it, yeah, I-9, which is the document
Mm,
you and your employer sign certifying that you are authorized to work in the United States. And this guy just said a few minutes ago in the deposition that his residency status was, I believe, a permanent resident. On the I-9, it says he's a U.S. citizen. And so as soon as we start asking about that conflict, his lawyer freaks out, takes a break, they come back, and they take the Fifth Amendment. Um, this becomes a whole drama, and Biss, the Nunes lawyer, uh, freaks out and says, "What do you mean he's taking the Fifth Amendment? He can't take the Fifth Amendment." All this bullshit. And we had to go petition the court to get the workers on this dairy their own lawyers, their own representation, because
yes.
we believed, and it was very clear to the judge because he agreed with us, that the Nunes family and Stephen Biss were not getting these guys adequate representation because they did not want them to plead the fifth. So we, the court, this does not happen in very many civil cases where the court actually appoints counsel for people who are being deposed. Um, and it's a terrible position to be in, right? Because to defend the lawsuit, we had to show that these poor guys who worked at the dairy were undocumented.
Mm,
And that's I thought long and hard about, like, how do we not do this? How do we short circuit?
yeah.
And there was no way out. I mean, they were suing us for $100 million. The whole case would revolve around whether the Nunes family, knowingly hired undocumented immigrants, and it was idiotic for them to proceed with this. And so we had to prove this. It's not as easy as you think to prove it. Um, and long story short, they get their own lawyers. We do the depositions, 6 depositions with 6 employees that we, through our own discovery process and own research, were quite sure were not legally authorized to work in the United States. All 6 of them took the fifth on every question.
Mm,
And to me, the case was over at that point. And again, I was like, why are they pursuing this case? Like, they're going to be, they're going to have ICE raid them at this point. Anyway, we hire an expert, goes through all of the documents we hand over, and he writes this report that basically says since 2006, the Nunes family dairy has been operating essentially as a criminal enterprise when it comes to its labor practices. Um, Again, I think there's no way they're going to continue this case now. This is nuts. Um, but they did, and the judge eventually decided on our behalf, and in his opinion, wrote that what I wrote about the undocumented immigrants was substantially objectively true. And I just think about that all the time right now when we're going through this the beginnings of Trump's mass deportation policy. Um, is we spent 6 years in litigation with this dairy in Iowa owned by the Nunes family, showing that it, since 2006, has knowingly violated uh, these laws, and has, even at the time of our litigation, not at the time I wrote the article in 2018, but at the time they were suing us, they were still hiring and employing undocumented immigrants, which of course they were. Every dairy, every farm in the country does. We all know that. Um, but so anyway, that was another
So you're just
weird.
put yourself.
Yeah.
If you're Devin Nunes, why do you pursue this?
So this is what I wrestled with: is like, did they, you know, did he really think that his family was the only one in the Midwest that, you know, had escaped the economic reality of
Mm,
of labor?
Mm,
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, he said that, he didn't know anything about it one way or the other. Um, but you don't have to know much to know that that's just the way it is. So I don't know. I don't know. And especially as these guys, after they take the fifth, after they see the expert report that this is all documented, I don't know why they didn't pull the plug on the case, and they waited until the judge, and they kept going until the judge wrote a 101-page opinion laying this all out and making it all public. So anyway, I mention all that because that's gotten a little buried in some of the sort of coverage of
yeah,
the piece. So that's a big part of the piece. And then in the middle of the case, I'll give it a little bit of way here. Um, the lawyer, after we won the case, based on the facts that I
yeah.
just explained, he's appealing it to um, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, where they had won a significant victory previously in this case. And he's got a lot going on in his life at this point. Some things that he had done are suddenly catching up with him, although I didn't know it at the time. His personal life is collapsing in a lot of important ways.
Mm,
Uh, and he's filing the appeal. Um, and he's struggling with some of the challenges of getting all of these documents to the appeals court, and he needs some more time, and he files this extension in my case. And it turns out it's the last filing he ever made in any of his cases. Was this Ahab, is this uh, obsession with going after me in this case. And he suffered a massive stroke shortly after he filed that document in my case, and has been essentially incapacitated ever since.
are we talking about Nunes or Bills?
Yes, the lawyer,
Okay,
the
okay,
lawyer.
okay.
So it was a kind of like in a case that just had so many weird twists and turns. To me, this was one of the weirdest. I mean, this guy woke up that morning, sent off a few posts on Truth Social,
Huh.
about a bunch of right wing issues. Filed this uh, document in the appeal, and then had a stroke. And anyway, so since that time, a lot of weird shit happened with the um, files, computers, documents that he had amassed in the many, many cases that he brought. Um,
Hmm.
so anyway, you got to read the piece to see
Yeah,
to read the rest, but it's some weird, weird stuff. So
I remember Nunes at the beginning of the Trump Russia investigation when he was still talking. He would have joint press conferences with Schiff.
yes, he was press friendly.
Yeah, something changed in him. I don't know
Something
why, what, or
changed.
how.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I totally agree with you. He went from being press friendly and deeply skeptical of the burn it all down right, um, to becoming the instigator of a scorched earth lawfare campaign against every journalist who wrote something critical of him.
Yeah.
And then became, I mean, I always the one irony I pointed out in my piece that I thought that just sticks with me is when I interviewed him in the beginning of the old Nunes in 2015. his the big takeaway from that interview, that I thought was so fascinating, is that he told me that what he fears the most in the Republican Party is
Mm.
the growth. These aren't his exact words, but this is essentially what he said. What he fears the most is the growth of far out right wing conspiracy theories that he sees the base of the Republican Party becoming obsessed with, and then forcing politicians to respond to
Mm,
these conspiracies as as if they're real. And he talked about how his constituent mail used to be like 80% policy stuff and like 20% far out conspiracy stuff, and how in recent years, this was 2015, it had
mm,
reversed. And I thought that was so interesting that he was concerned about that. And eventually he would go on to work for Donald Trump and be the CEO of the company that owns Social, the central clearinghouse for some of the stuff that he told me in 2015 was destroying the conservative movement.
it's like a
So
sense
it's
of,
quite a character arc there.
I used to occasionally I'd walk with him back from votes and sit with him in his office, like 2017. And he was still that guy. All right. He'd engage with you, you know, a- and also very trusted senior member of that world of Republican leadership. You don't get to be the House Intelligence Committee chair without having that backing, and certainly
Yeah,
not for something of that stature and import. Um,
absolutely.
it's almost like he came to, and this is just supposition on my part, but watching, reading of this, it's like he came to almost embrace the nihilism of it. Just like, oh, whatever, I'll get rich. Um, Again, I don't have any reporting to back that up, but watching how he's behaved from the guy who would sit there and talk with you seriously,
Yeah.
or, about his district. All right, about where the islands that he's from. It's like
The
if you,
Azores, the
yes,
Azores off Portugal.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Beautiful place. I was actually there earlier this year on vacation.
Oh wow,
And I will say what I learned, the dairy products in the Azores, amazing. And
really?
that's where his family comes from. So they were dairy farmers in the Azores, and credit where credit is due. The Azorians, they know how to make some damn good milk. So
Really?
if you go to the Azores and you have the local milk, the first thing you'll realize is how great it is, and also a lot of great cheese products there. So
What's up?
yeah, yeah. So it's like it's a very hot spot for vacationing. So if you're looking for an interesting locale, check it out.
Is it expensive to get there?
It's not too expensive to get there. It's typical Europe prices, and then
Okay,
you know compared to the rest of Europe, Portugal is very affordable,
okay.
and the Azores are very affordable, especially if you go at the peak summer.
He, he's such a straight. Uh, he's such a compelling character in that flip. Something happened with him, you know, and it's not like Lindsey Graham, who's always been a bit of a wheeler dealer, right? And he maintains this veneer of, well, I'm on the inside, okay, you know. It's not like that. No, this one felt, and as we see in your experience, it felt personal.
Yeah, yeah. It was. Yeah, I felt like it was personal. He you're allowed to go to any of the depositions when you're in litigation. It's one of the things I learned.
Mm,
Um, Now, I didn't go to his there were two. We took his deposition twice. I didn't go to his depositions. I thought it would be, you know, kind of weird. Um, he came to my deposition and sat there at the table, which I thought was very strange,
mm,
and to me smacked of a effort to try and like intimidate me or something.
yeah,
So that is the kind of personal interest he took in the case.
yeah,
He didn't just have Biss, out there doing the lawyering. He decided to show up for an 8-hour deposition in Washington, D.C., where he doesn't live. Um, And so it was strange. I have to say it was very strange.
He got very angry. I remember I caught him one time. There's the bank of 3 elevators that did off the house floor, I think it's Rayburn. They come in from the house office buildings, and, this is would have been, like, summer of 2017, maybe, we talked a bunch, and, he's walking into the chamber for something, and George is with him, his body man, the short guy, alright? I like
Yeah.
George, nice guy, you know? Uh, and he's like I asked him something about whatever with the investigation, and he was like, "I'm not telling you anything until you tell me who the source is and that you tell me the source is Andrew Weissman." And I was like, "Are you shitting me? Like, dude, like, come on, man. You know the rules, all right? Like the same way that we're interacting here, like I'm not gonna out whatever we're talking about. Respect that relationship." And he's like, "Yeah, well, I think we're done talking until you do that. Fake news." And I'm like,
Wow.
"Yeah, right?" And so I looked at him, I'm like, "You're a fake congressman. Like, don't talk to another human like that, right?
Wow. You said that.
Yeah, like,
Wow.
have some respect as a
Good for
professional." And that was 2017, all right? That was back then. I've never said that to another member of Congress in my entire life. But, and you know
good for
this, we're
you.
thanks, bro. Yeah, we have a working relationship, and it's built on respect, all right? It's built on trust, all right? I trust that, he trusts that I'm not gonna blow up anything that he's saying without approval until you break that trust, you
Yeah.
know? And I was really shocked by it and disappointed that
Yeah.
somebody of that stature would behave that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good for you. I think, more reporters should, you know, do that kind of thing and push back. Um,
Oh, we have to, man. I really, I enjoy your reporting, especially here because I feel like we're in this moment, and you've write about this, a bit over at Tellus, um, that we have so much pressure from the top down,
yeah.
uh, created on purpose, right? This is strategic, mafia style pressure, all right, all right, file spurious lawsuits, to exact, coverage, all right, to try to achieve certain style of coverage. Um, Where it does create pressure from the top in certain instances,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
see, I look at there's not going to blow them up entirely here, but there's one outlet that
Blow them
did a
up.
very,
Blow them up, Tom. No, okay.
I'll say it, I don't mind. I'm not going to go work there. Um, Axios did incredible reporting a year ago, year and a half ago, on how Project 2025 was, and Jonathan Swan before that, 2025 was the policy playbook.
Yep.
And then inside the Trump campaign, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita send the threats, right? And what they did this last election, which is very different than 2016 and certainly not 2020, which was, chaos incarnate. Um, uh, you can imagine how things might have turned out if Brad Parscale was still running the show in 2024. We might be looking at President Kamala Harris at this point, or Biden for that matter. um, uh, Susie and LaCivita, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, um, that abused the press. All right, and they
No
ran
doubt
a
about it.
yeah. I mean, I remember they it was incredible. We know guys that Vaughn Hilliard, at NBC News, an amazing reporter, is just you know,
Yeah.
all right. This 19-year-old kid named Big Balls. All right, he does not have a trademark on that. Okay, he doesn't deserve that name. All right. Um, asked great questions when he was full. Very just good old school. Power, hold power to account.
Yeah.
And Susie and LaCivita are like, "All right, you don't get to do that anymore. All right, we're kicking you out of this." And it presaged a lot of what we saw, what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
Attacking the AP, bringing in political activists to parade as journalists, but um, but Axios backed down. I mean, they were correct. They were 100% correct in their reporting,
Yeah.
but backed down, and that was disappointing to see. But I mean, we could focus on the
Well,
disappointments, but
there's a lot more of that in our in in the business than we would like there to be, and we could do a whole show on this. But I was never one of I was never like a you know corporate media sucks because it's compromised. That was never
yeah,
I never thought that that was um the biggest problem with the media. In the Trump era, it has become the biggest problem with the media,
yes,
is because he has absolutely no problem with using the tools of the state to go after big media companies and have these corporate chieftains try to reach down into the newsroom and meddle. And so, because he has changed, I think it has made it very, very, very difficult for news organizations that are owned by any big
yeah,
company that has business before the government. And it's really, really changed things. Um, and you know, uh, you know, I don't consider the New York Times in that camp, and I think there's a reason that a publication that's depending on subscribers is
mm,
so fiercely independent, and to me at least does understand in a very clear-eyed way what's going on. I wish I could say the same thing about the Washington Post right now, despite the many great journalists there who are
yes,
doing heroic
yes,
work. But Bezos is just to me it just fatally compromised by the way that Bezos has dealt with the Trump administration. Just you can't be sure like what he is doing behind the scenes, given what we know recently, given him showing up, and at the inaugural, and sucking up to Trump. And anyway, so that to me is a major, major problem. The way that ABC caved
uh,
in to Trump over this ludicrous lawsuit against Stephanopoulos. Obviously, what's going on now with CBS and 60 Minutes. It's a significant change that as much as people might have hated corporate
mm,
media before and sort
mm,
of had certain conspiracy theories about it, I'm not saying that kind of thing didn't happen, but you didn't have administrations that were willing to put that kind of pressure to force that kind of behavior at these companies, and that's bad. And it's a big reason why trust in media continues to
mm,
decline, and a big reason why a lot of people are showing up here at Substack, both on the
yeah,
reporter side and on the subscriber side.
yeah,
So, a good way to end this: please subscribe to Telos News. It's TELOS.news, and obviously subscribe to 24 Site News. And we should do this more often, Tom. I
yes, sir.
appreciate you letting me spend 15-20 minutes telling the story
Loved it, man.
of
Loved it.
it's this is like
It's
therapy.
it's beautiful, man. It's I tell my kid, man. It's if you love it, it's there is no work. It's all joy. Yeah,
That is my experience at Substack. I should have done this years ago. It's great, and it's great to have the kind of passionate, engaged, smart subscribers that we get on this platform. And if you guys are listening and you're a fan of 24 Site News and you haven't subscribed to Tellus, I hope you'll check us out. And Tom and I will be doing this again soon.
listen, excellent, brother.
All right, I'll see you soon. Take care.
All right, baby. We'll see you. Cheers, guys.